Here to weigh in on all of the legal issues that are surrounding the president is famed attorney and scholar Alan Dershowitz. Great to see you, Professor.
Thank you.
All right, Alan, the president reacted to Comey's testimony by calling the testimony untruthful and called the whole deal a rigged fraud. Your take?
Well, I think people do forget, particularly when they've lived busy lives, and these may have not been the most significant aspects, but that standard should be applied to everybody. It should have been applied as well to Flynn. It should be applied to the people who the special counsel have indicted for making statements that may have been just misremembering. I mean, there was one incident reported in the media where one of the witnesses misremembered something, was given a day to check the records, and came back and corrected it, and now they're threatening to indict him for what he said the first time around. I think we have to have a single standard, and I think the standard should be a generous one. It should basically say that if people honestly forgot, they shouldn't be indicted. There should have to be proof beyond a reasonable doubt that they didn't forget, that they just used the forgetting as an excuse. But again, that has to be applied across the board to everybody.
All right, let's listen to one man who was in the room during Comey's testimony, and that's Republican Congressman Jim Jordan of Ohio. He's, of course, a member of both the House Judiciary and Oversight Committees. Professor, let's listen to Congressman Jordan.
Mm-hmm.
245 times he says, don't remember, don't recall, and don't know. What was most, I guess, the biggest takeaway for me was the don't know part. Specifically, he didn't know much about Christopher Steele, the guy who they used his work product, the dossier, to go get the warrant to spy on the Trump campaign. I was mostly struck by that. Here's the key player, the guy who put together the dossier that was the basis for getting the warrant, and you didn't know anything about him. I find that hard to believe, but those were his answers yesterday.
Professor Dershowitz, your reaction to Congressman Jordan's statements there, because I'm incredulous. I fail to believe that James Comey doesn't remember sweeping details about some of the most significant FBI operations in history. Your reaction to Congressman Jordan?
Well, I can't sit in judgment. I didn't watch the testimony. As I said, I'm prepared to resolve doubts, always in favor of a person who has a generally good reputation telling the truth. Look, I'm not a Comey fan. I think he cost Hillary Clinton the election, at least was one of the contributing factors. He never should have done what he did. So I'm not a fan of his. I knew him when he was in Boston. I was a fan then, but I think he really lost his credibility over the past year or so more. And yet I'm not prepared to jump to the conclusion that he was committing perjury. I'd like to see it in context. It is surprising that he doesn't remember things that he's famous for his memory and famous for his note-taking. I'm sure they asked him the follow-up question, did he have any notes of any of these conversations? Did he check his notes before he came and testified? Is there anything that could refresh his recollection? But again, I wouldn't jump to conclusions, and I would always apply the same standard to Democrats, Republicans, people we like, people we don't like.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to Michael Cohen. Now, prosecutors are alleging the president may have directed his former lawyer, Cohen, to make illegal payments during the campaign. Now, we talked a bit earlier in the show about the word impeachment being thrown around by Democrats yesterday. We've spoken about that word impeachment being thrown around by Democrats many, many times on the show. In your professional opinion, and again, understanding you've only read the same memo that we've all read, how much trouble do you think the president is in, if any?
Well, first of all, read my book, The Case Against Impeaching Trump. I lay out all the arguments for why impeachment can't be used, except if you have treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors, none of which I think apply here. So I don't think he's in danger of being impeached and removed. I also think you have to understand that a president, a candidate, can contribute as much as he wants to his own campaign, can pay as much hush money as he wants. There's nothing against the law for that. And even if he had to report it, the reporting did not have to take place until after the election because of the timing. So I don't see this as a strong case of violating election laws. They tried it on Edwards, and it backfired. The acquittals and hung juries. I don't think they're going to go after him on this. In a report they make, because they don't have to prove it in a report. All they have to do is lay it out. But if there were ever a trial, I don't think that the president would be convicted of campaign law violations.
Professor, let me ask you about that, because you alluded a few minutes ago to there being a double standard in this entire process.
Yeah.
We see Barack Obama's campaign had $2 million in campaign finance violations. Like you say, they were allowed to retroactively report and pay a $375,000 fee. Here it seems they're criminalizing and prosecuting for those same offenses, only the dollar amounts are less. Doesn't that seem like there is a double standard in this case?
I do think it's different. I think the campaign failure to pay campaign to list campaign contributions and others, that's an obligation of the campaign itself, not of the candidate.
Right.
Here you have evidence that the president may have directed Cohen, and there's a tape recording suggesting that he certainly knew about it, to make payments to at least one of the women. But I don't see that as a crime. I don't see making payments as a crime, particularly since it would have multiple purposes. One of the purposes would be to protect his family, his wife, his children from embarrassment. Another would be to protect his brand, his commercial brand.
Right.
And a third might be to help his campaign. Remember, he was well known for his attitudes toward women well before this ever happened. The tape, obviously, and others, none of that destroyed his candidacy. So it's unlikely that these revelations would have destroyed his candidacy. I don't think it's affected his poll numbers, particularly. So I do think they're stretching the law to apply to somebody who they don't like.
Right, and my layperson's takeaway from this, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you're my attorney, Professor, if Alan Dershowitz is my lawyer and I'm a candidate and I say, hey, Alan, settle this case out for me, isn't it incumbent upon you, my attorney, to do it in a legally compliant manner? If you don't, am I responsible for that?
No, you should do it in a legally compliant manner, and you should be compensated for it. And it's okay to list it as a legal expense because it was part of a settlement. And settlements are regarded as legal expenses. So
right.
Again, should it have been done differently? Yes, it should have been done differently. Is it a crime? Is it a sin? There's a big difference between a political sin and a federal crime. I think the case for it being a federal crime is an extremely weak one. I suspect prosecutors think that too. Otherwise, they would have given Cohen a better deal. I think he's going to get a pretty harsh sentence on Wednesday.
All right, let's talk about the top Democrat who's coming in to lead the House Judiciary Committee, New York's Gerald Nadler. Let's listen to what he said yesterday.
If it's proven, are those impeachable offenses?
Well, they would be impeachable offenses. Whether they are important enough to justify an impeachment is a different question, but certainly they'd be impeachable offenses because even though they were committed before the president became president, they were committed in the service of fraudulently obtaining the office. That would be that would be an impeachable offense.
Professor, your response to Congressman Nadler.
Well, there are three areas. One, if the president commits an impeachable offense while he's president, that's clear. Second, if he commits bribery or other high crimes and misdemeanors in his private business relation before he's a candidate, that's clear. That can't be an impeachable offense. The third is the hard one nobody knows the answer to. If he committed crimes which helped him become president, whether that would be an impeachable offense. There's nothing in the Constitution that answers that question either way. And so the Senate would have to make a preliminary, the Congress would have to make a preliminary decision on that, then the Senate. And then ultimately, there might be judicial review to see whether or not it satisfied the constitutional criteria for impeachment or removal of a president. Hard question.
Alan Dershowitz, and please check out Professor Dershowitz's book, The Case Against Impeaching Trump. Professor, always a pleasure to have you. Really appreciate your insights. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for watching. If you'd like to see more breaking news coverage, exclusive interviews, and great videos, click over here to our YouTube channel and subscribe. And don't forget to download the free Newsmax TV app. Newsmax TV, it's real news for real people.